I am sure you have heard that in order to be successful in sales, you need to hustle. That the harder you and your team work, the more successful you will be. In fact, when I Google hustle and sales, I get 27 million hits. 27 million. And if I Google hustle sales quotes, I get 4.2 million results. But what if hustling is actually hurting your sales team? Join us for this episode of Sales Fiction, where we have sales professional and sales star Mindy Miley joining us to share her insights on sales, including why hustling might be hurting your sales and what to do instead. Welcome to Sales Fiction, a podcast that helps small sales teams get big results. I'm your host, Christy Lawrence, the founder of Mighty Sales and a longtime sales professional who traded my corporate sales career to help small but mighty teams do more with less. Each week on this podcast, we separate sales fact from sales fiction so that you can hyper-focus your effort on the skills, strategies, and tools that will have the biggest impact on your bottom line. Let's dive right in. Mindy Miley has over 20 years of sales experience, ranging from media sales and advertising sales to doing sales for a transportation company. She's managed sales team, and her customers always have the best things to say about her. So one of the things I loved about Mindy when I was in the community where she was a sales rep doing advertising sales for small businesses, and I was talking with a lot of small business owners in that community. If you ever said the name Mindy Miley, everyone always had the nicest things to say about her, which is one of the best compliments a salesperson can get. That not only did she have outstanding numbers and her teams thrived, but her customers loved her as well. So Mindy, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm blushing.
Well, you shouldn't be. It's all true. And one of the things I love about you. So just for background for you guys listening, Mindy and I actually met at a Women in Business conference, the very first Women in Business conference hosted by the Tri-Cities Chamber of Commerce in the Tri-Cities, Washington. I'm not going to say how many years ago because it makes me feel old because I feel like it was like 2 years ago, which it was not. And Mindy was one of the first people I met there, and I made her be my conference buddy for the whole day because she knew everyone and I didn't know as many people. I was just starting my business at the time, and so we like to have our anniversary of friendship at the Women in Business conference.
I love it. It was the best decision ever. Best conference buddy friendship. Awesome.
Yes, friendships can be born at conferences.
Oh, absolutely.
So, Mindy, tell us a little bit, how did you get started in sales?
Well, I mean, it depends on what you think of as sales. I started working the day I turned 16 at Red Robin as a hostess. Awesome. And when I turned 18, I obviously transferred over to be a waitress, where really, I mean, you're not just taking orders. They're trying to teach you how to upsell products, how to make, the more expensive drinks, the desserts, appetizing, and encourage people to buy more. So to me, I look at it as that was probably one of the best experiences I had was working for Red Robin. They had a great training experience, and it was all about customer experience and the service that they provide. So for me, that's what I say. And then I actually did media sales when I was at school in Pullman. Go Cougs.
Go Cougs.
Yes. I worked for the Daily Evergreen up there. Awesome. And so I sold newspaper ads. Told myself after that job I would never do sales again. I absolutely despised it.
So what was it that you despised about it?
I think because it was just such a part-time job and there was just so much turnover being in a college newspaper. And so you really didn't fully understand what you were doing, what you were providing for your clients. The clients never really took the time to have a connection with you because they knew that you'd be gone next year. I overall just did not enjoy it. I didn't find any kind of satisfaction out of it.
Knowing you, that makes sense because it sounds like, which I would have never thought about, but at a college newspaper, when you have somebody coming in every year that's new in that role, it can feel very transactional, both for you when you're in the sales role and for the customer.
Yes.
which is not something most truly good salespeople like, that they want to be able to go in and solve problems for their customers and have deeper conversations versus just saying, hey, do you want to buy this?
Exactly. And we did not have the proper training to do that or the time to develop those relationships. So no, my first experience was not fabulous. I mean, I'm glad I did it, but yeah, I kept telling myself that is definitely not the route I'm going down.
Which is funny because then you spent quite a bit of time doing advertising sales for media companies after you were in college. So how did you get back into it?
I originally actually wasn't going to come back to the Tri-Cities. I decided to, and so right away I just picked up my part-time job at Red Robin again. So I was slinging burgers, and a position opened up at a local media group that had 5 radio stations. And I was like, well, I can either sell radio advertising or I can still sell burgers with a college degree. Nothing against that. It was just, I said, okay, nope, I'll go the radio route. I love music. Let's just try this out. And that's pretty much all it was. And from there, gosh, I was there for 12 years.
Yeah. So what was different for you in that experience versus when you were at the Daily Evergreen?
In the beginning, it was a little odd. I mean, we're talking before everyone had laptops or computers. We had shared computer stations. You know, we had, the veteran was 65 years old. Here I am, 22, fresh out of school. But what I learned valuable information from all of my coworkers, from everyone in the community. Basically, it was just learning to really develop relationships, but not just develop a relationship for a transactional purpose, but an authentic relationship where you want to help someone. And I am a helper by nature.
Yeah.
And so as soon as I could kind of put that spin on it, like, wait, I'm not selling something. I'm offering solutions. I'm helping you solve problems. And, you know, from there, you know, a lot of training. I'm really not big on a lot of sales books per se.
Yeah.
I actually find, you know, Brene Brown's work to be very valuable for anyone who's in sales or any person in general.
So say a little bit more about that.
I think for a long time, I was shy and really kind of hid who I was because I was 22. I was a younger female in this industry in the Tri-Cities. And so it was really hard to kind of break through. And I did learn through Brene Brown and just a lot of studies on authenticity and being transparent.
Yeah.
It just made a huge, huge difference.
So just being authentic and transparent.
Yeah. And I really led with, when I would do cold calls or meet with people, I was always wanting to provide a value. So it wasn't just, hey, can we meet so that I can cross you off my list and tell my boss? I would do research. You know, I would say, oh, hey, I have an idea for something I've seen that you're doing. Would you want to talk about it? So I would always try and find value before I even made the initial call. And then as those conversations started, I was very transparent about who I am as a person, what I believe, and why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I think my why is what really helped me develop those relationships.
Yeah. It's interesting just hearing your story, thinking about it, because my first true, to your point, I think all of my jobs I've ever had are sales jobs, but my first job that was actually called a sales job, I was 24 and I looked young for my age, and I would go into offices, medical offices, and people would say, are you even old enough to have a job? And feeling so intimidated. And I think when you're starting out in sales, that sometimes it feels like age is a disadvantage. But if you can just own who you are and be authentic in that you can still earn people's respect and trust. But it can kind of hurt your confidence a little bit, I think, when you're first starting out. And that's the type of reception that you're getting. Did you find that?
Oh, absolutely. One of my strongest suits now, I think, is networking.
Yeah.
Back when I started, that was probably one of my weakest. I would get scared. Even just going to a chamber luncheon, it looked very different than they do now. Just the workforce in general looked different. And so, yeah, as a young female, it was kind of like I felt I was shunned or put to the side. I just didn't have the relevance to be a part of the good old boys club. So,
Yep.
So it was a little frustrating. But again, I think honestly, like that Women in Business conference, I think that's helped so many professionals here
Absolutely.
in the Tri-Cities, and just finding those bonds and really growing together.
Absolutely. And I think, whether you're a young female starting in sales, a young male starting in sales, that building your confidence through finding shared connections and people who both will mentor you and who are in the same part of their career and grow with you is incredibly, incredibly valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it feels uncomfortable to go out and build those connections early on, because who knows, maybe you'll still have those connections 15 years later.
Right? Hopefully. Oh my God.
Yes. So as you kind of look back on your sales career, I know you mentioned that you don't really love a lot of traditional sales books. I actually am in the same boat. I feel like so much of the way sales is talked about is very old school, always be closing,
Mm-hmm. Hustle,
a little
hustle,
bit
hustle.
manipulative,
Yeah.
hustle. So there's a lot of sales advice that actually makes me cringe.
Same.
But what is the best piece of sales advice that you've ever received?
I think the best piece is probably from one of my mentors. He was my manager for goodness, 14, 15 years. And he really just took me under his wing. He's been so invaluable to me as in my career and as a person. So I really value him. But it was just do things for the right reason and the money will follow.
I love that.
And I know it's so simple and might sound a little cliche, but honestly, I have always had that in the back of my head for anything I'm doing. You know, just make sure that your intentions are pure, that that doesn't mean it's going to be right, but as long as you're trying your best and your intentions are there, it will all work out. And I have found that time and time again.
And I think that does, I think a lot of people in sales sometimes struggle, whether they're starting a business and they're having to do sales at a different level for the first time, or they're new to sales, or if people who are coaching a team and those team members are new to sales, that there's this hesitancy sometimes that people don't want to be what is traditionally defined as a salesperson. And
Mhm.
so that advice to just do the right thing is so counterculture to actually how sales is thought about. It frees up a lot of ability to just be present and approach sales from a place of, to your point, authenticity, bringing value to the customers. And if you do those things over time, the sales will follow and it will take care of itself.
Yeah, and I think we see that more and more in industries and most organizations. I mean, I know when I started, it was not like that. It was, we're going to hit the numbers and you'll get this little carrot if you do this, and so will do this. And they were pitting people against each other. And I'm just really fortunate to be in an industry where it's not like that anymore. I
Yeah.
mean, people, consumers, buyers, they can see through it.
Absolutely. And you are 100% right that customers can see through the bullshit. It's funny, I've actually started when I'm doing cold calls for a client. Sometimes I'll actually just start out the call with, introducing myself. This is Christy with XYZ. This is a sales call. And it sounds so counterintuitive, but I think that one statement of just being authentic, like this is what it is, the response, it's pretty well received most of the time, surprisingly, because people value like, oh, you're being honest. You're not trying to trick me into getting to talk to the decision maker. You're not having to make me think about it. It's just clear.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that was one of the things that kind of helped me too, honestly, when you just said the decision makers. So everyone's always trying to get to that one person, which I do understand. I mean, they're the ones who write the checks, but they're relying on their people and those people have a job. And I always treated them with the most respect and kindness. And why can't they be a part of this decision-making process too?
Yep.
So I did always try and include them when I could. It was never just trying to step on people to get to a higher place. I think that helped get me to where I did in my career.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right that, oftentimes the decision maker is taking feedback from everyone in the organization, and the gatekeepers are the one that ultimately are going to shape how you get in front of that decision maker anyways. So investing as much time and kindness
Mm-hmm.
into everyone you're talking to in the organization as you do to the decision maker.
Yep, absolutely. I don't know how many times I heard from some of the veteran staff when I first started, like, oh, you're just wasting your time. And I was like, nah, no, I don't really think I am. I just really took a different approach than what some of the veteran staff had done. And I'm glad I did.
Absolutely. Well, that kind of leads into my next question. What's the worst piece of sales advice that you've ever received?
I don't know if I'd say it's the worst piece, but this is one of the things that makes me cringe. And I don't want to make anyone upset, but the whole hustle mentality,
Yep.
I get it to a point, but for me, it's not about the hustle. It's about being intentional. And one thing that I have learned over the years is because I had burnt myself out in a couple positions. And sometimes it helps to just slow down. And I'm not
Absolutely.
saying come to a halt, but slow down, think about what you're doing, and set your intentions. So for me, hustle is really counterintuitive to that. And I try and avoid that hustle mentality.
Absolutely. And I love that you said that, don't hustle, be intentional. And it's true. Like I've been reading about, I should say, this whole idea of I can't even say the word, but ultradian rhythms, where we have like our natural work cycles, where they show that essentially you have 90 minutes of productivity. And if you work beyond that, fatigue starts to set in.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I can see it when it happens, where all of a sudden, like I have a train of thought and it's gone, or I'm just zoning out in a meeting, or all of a sudden I need a piece of cake or a piece of chocolate. And it's because your body's at that stress level versus, okay, working with your body's natural rhythms, work for 90 minutes, then take a break for 15 minutes, go for a walk, do a little bit of stretching, drink a glass of water, and come back. And I actually get more done. So that's one part on the not hustle thing. Another thing is I am always telling clients, slow down the sales process.
Yeah.
If you can slow down the sales conversation, it's like you have to go slow to go fast. And you will have a much better impact long term. For example, cold calling, I'm always telling people the goal of the cold call might not even be to book an appointment. It might be to just get the name of the person that you're going to call the next time to see if you can book an appointment.
Yes.
And you're definitely not trying to make a sale necessarily on a cold call.
No.
You're trying to start a conversation. And so if you can slow that down, it makes the process more enjoyable for everybody involved.
Exactly. It really does. And that's even, when you're closing, that was one of the things, that's another thing. It's like closing. For some reason, it just kind of cringes me a little bit, even though I know it's just part of the sales process. There was no need to do any kind of hard close, because what I always felt I was doing is I was providing them solutions, opportunities that were creative solutions for problems that these businesses had. And I didn't want to close them. I didn't want them to feel pressured into making a decision. I wanted them to feel comfortable with it. And oftentimes I would even say, you know what? Why don't you think about it a couple days? Let's touch base. If you have any questions, or maybe we need to, change something to make it feel better, let's do that. But a lot of times I would walk out and they would say, whoa, what do you mean you just walked out on a sell? Yep, I sure did, because I want you to feel good about it.
Yeah.
Because if
It's
you
a
start
long
out,
term.
it's a long-term commitment, especially with, media sales, because it is an ongoing process. You're doing 3 to 12-month campaigns at a time. If they don't feel good about it starting out, it is not going to end well, I promise. So I would rather wait until it feels right to them.
Absolutely.
And that's part of having the funnel. You have the sales funnel. You have each client in a different pipeline. But I was thinking phases.
Oh, yeah.
Different phases of the sales cycle. That was one of the things too that really helped me. I would just walk out of it and say, let's think about it and let's get back together. And I think I earned a lot of respect from businesses because they were not used to that.
Yeah. Well, and then when they make the decision, it's a true yes because they want to do it, not a yes that they're hesitant about. And then because ultimately what happens in my experience is when people get pressured into a sale, they don't become very happy customers.
Mm-hmm.
Or long-term customers. So ultimately it ends up costing the company a lot in terms of time and energy to keep those customers, and then they don't retain them. It's not worth it.
Yeah, exactly. And I know we're talking more long-term relationships, and some people might think, oh, well, with transactional sales, it'd be the same, but typically you still have people coming back over a lifespan. Like, what's that client worth over their lifetime? Like, is it really worth making, one quick sell where they could be unhappy and tell 10 other people and then never come back to you? Or is it worth taking the time to cultivate that relationship and reap the rewards later on down the road? So,
absolutely. What do you feel like is the most overlooked aspect of sales?
I think follow through. Follow through is a big one. Honestly, I was able to really get in and work with clients pretty quickly because people just were not following up. If they couldn't get the sell right away, they moved on. So nobody would really work it or follow through. And I think if you just do what you say you're going to do and have good follow through, make sure you have some sort of calendar or some sort of system in place that works for you and your industry and what you're doing to make sure that you don't let fall through the cracks.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that can be hard to do sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm not saying it's always easy, but but I do think it's important. And sometimes say no also. I mean, if somebody, well, I mean, I've actually kind of walked away from business where I did not feel that it was good for my soul, for me as a person, for my company. I just saw a lot of red flags and I walked away.
Yep.
Wish I would have learned that in my personal life before, but hey, that's that's fine.
That's another podcast.
That's another podcast.
Agreed.
But yeah, I mean, learning to say no is important also. And then being okay with not having all the answers.
Yeah.
So it's okay not to have the right products, right services, but if you can be a resource to someone and just help them, that doesn't mean you have to stay in touch with them every week for the next 10 years. People really like those that truly want to try and help them
Yep.
and do what's best for everyone.
Absolutely. So when you think back on your time of managing sales teams and you think back about kind of coaching people, developing people that are in sales, what do you think as a sales leader or a leader of a sales team is the most important thing that you can be developing your team on?
I think it's empowering them to come up with creative solutions and creative ideas for their clients, be open to listening to them.
Yeah.
And honestly, my team was just amazing. I absolutely love them. Open to them as people. I mean, sales is not easy, no matter, it's fun and it can be very rewarding for many different reasons, but it can also be exhausting, can be depressing at times. It plays with all the emotions. And so I was very careful to make sure to check in on my team and get their pulse and see, how are you doing?
Yep.
Like, okay, you're having a rough day. Maybe you should do some paperwork then. If you don't feel like hitting the streets, I completely understand. Someone's mom passed away. Like, well, I'm sorry, but to me, the cell can wait.
Yeah.
And so I think being able to provide them that space and that grace really made them want to come back and work even harder, not just for themselves and their clients, but also for our team.
And I agree. I mean, not every day is a great sales day. And I think it's okay to acknowledge that things work in cycles and
Mm-hmm.
recognizing you're in your team's own cycles, that there are going to be days where you just don't have it. And so there are other things that you can be doing in terms of follow-up or paperwork or expense reports. And so do those things on your days where you're lacking that motivation. That doesn't mean sometimes you don't have to just go.
Yeah, exactly.
The motivation.
Yeah.
But there are some days where you're not going to have it, and that's okay. Know and acknowledge it, but you can still be productive in other ways.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that was, I mean, we had record sales during that time. I was so proud of my team. They were bringing in so much revenue for themselves. And I mean, businesses were thriving around town. It was amazing to watch, and really to watch the camaraderie within the team, because they knew that, okay, well, if, Steve over here is dealing with the death of a family member, we need to all help out and lift him up, lift the team up. And then maybe 2 months down the road, another person is dealing with some catastrophe. And so the rest of the team comes together and helps them out. So it was just that automatic team building.
Absolutely.
Automatic team building by giving them that space and grace and empowering them to do what they felt was right for themselves and their clients.
And I think it goes back to what you said earlier about that you don't have to hustle, right? Be intentional. And that's true whether you're a team leader. It's not about just going out and making your team work harder, but having them be focused and intentional. And that sometimes hustling isn't the best thing, and you can still thrive without having to go into that hustle mentality.
Exactly. I mean, it's just like that, work smarter, not harder.
Yep.
I have no problem with working hard. And for people that want to do 40+ hour weeks, that's great. But as long as I do what I set out to do and what I tell people I'll do, I mean, I can at least go home and get a good night's sleep off of that.
Absolutely. And this is right counterintuitive to a lot of what you hear in the sales culture. But I had a mentor for years and a boss for years in sales who'd always say, I don't care how many hours you work. I don't care if you work 5 hours, 50 hours, 100 hours. Take care of your customers and hit your numbers.
Yep.
And I think giving people the freedom and the flexibility of what that looks like, and recognizing that there are those waves that happen. And there's going to be times when you're super motivated and you're working harder. And there's going to be times when you're not, and not panicking during those times that you're not, but staying focused and intentional on what's the actual goal. It's not just to work harder. It's not just to hustle.
Exactly. Exactly. And that is, I think, one of the best rewards of a sales career. I guess depending on where you're working, but the flexibility.
Absolutely.
I mean, especially being a working mom, having that flexibility with a sales career was just invaluable with my kids growing up.
Absolutely.
I cannot imagine sitting at a desk for 40 hours a week, and how would I be able to volunteer in the school? How would I be able to take them to, soccer practice, dance? I mean, I know that there are people that do it, but for me, having that flexibility was absolutely invaluable.
Absolutely. I always say, having spent almost my entire career in sales, and outside sales for that matter, right? Not inside sales. So out going and meeting with customers, and I'm like, when do people drop off dry cleaning and go to the grocery store that aren't in sales? Like, so weird. My mind doesn't wrap around it.
Right. I like, oh, you can't stop and get groceries before it, and it's
Like
just,
off
it's so
times, or pick up a prescription in the middle of the day, just in between appointments.
Yes. Yes, it's crazy. And then, I've tried to talk to so many young college students or young professionals who are kind of like I was, I don't want to be in sales, stay away from that. And I've tried to convince them that, it's not what it seems. And that one of the biggest hurdles that I've found is they just want to know their income. So if there's any kind of commissions, bonuses, that sort of thing involved, it really makes people nervous, which I do understand, but there's also the high end of the rewards with that.
Absolutely. I have a client right now where we're working on moving them over to a performance-based pay, where it's balanced between a salary and a performance-based pay.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at the projections, almost the entire sales team will make more money if they just keep their numbers consistent on this plan.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there's so much hesitation and resistance to it, because it feels like something's being taken away, even though if they just keep doing what they're doing, they will get a substantial raise. And it's just letting go of the fact that, yes, that paycheck's not guaranteed, but also it's not capped, and you have the ability to influence what it looks like.
Yes.
But you have to trust the employer that they're setting goals that are attainable.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that's sometimes where that breakdown gets missed, is if they don't trust the employer that it isn't a trick to try and take away money, that they want them to succeed. They want them to have the flexibility, and they actually want them to earn more money.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that as sales leaders at a higher level within organizations, if you are consistently having team members to not hit their sales goal, especially if it's the majority of your sales team, that you might need to look at your projections to make sure that those sales numbers are attainable.
Exactly.
But I do want to say, for you guys who are listening, as we talk about different workflows with people, and if you are managing a sales team and you're thinking, man, I have people that just aren't feeling it right now, we did record an episode a couple of weeks ago on how to coach someone out of a sales slump. And it goes into a lot of the things that we're talking about right now, in terms of really identifying what is the reason for that slump, because defining the reason for it is going to shape how you coach them out of it. So definitely go back and listen to that if that's something that's percolating in your mind right now, in terms of, well, that sounds all good and well, but what happens when they're really in a slump and they're not getting out of it? That's a great resource to help you.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I'll have to check that one out. I know for me, a lot of the times, it'd be a hurdle against cold calls. And I'd say, well, why? Why can't? And there was some sort of fear there.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's not like you just say, oh, forget it, I'm going to go to the river and play all day. But it was like, okay, I need to figure out, why am I fearful of making a cold call today? I haven't been for 2 weeks. What's going on? And so it's really just, trying to figure out what's the core reason that you're feeling this way, and working on that.
Is it the specific client? Is it something in your own mindset?
Yep.
Is
And
there a distraction of something else?
I definitely, I've had 2 clients make me cry. So So sometimes, yes, it was that.
Yeah, absolutely. I always laugh because I feel like I had clients when I was, in the field every day doing sales, the clients that you dread seeing, but then on the other hand, those accounts where I would go when I was just having a bad day. And I knew it would always lift me up and make me feel better. And I think it's important to know who those accounts are
Yes.
and have them on standby.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that was one of the things too that my mentor had told me about taking space if you're not feeling it, because you don't want to take your bad energy and your negative energy to people either. But if you have that right person, if maybe you're close with a client and you can laugh and talk about, what's going on, that's different. But I've been very careful about where I take my energy these days.
Yeah. And you're right, because your clients, the prospects, the people on the other end of the phone or on the other end of the Zoom meeting these days, they can feel your energy. And communications is about so much more than what we say. It's about the energy that we bring to it. And so if you aren't in a good mental headspace, you got to get your headspace right first. It reminds me, I heard someone talking about when they do EMT training that they teach EMTs how to lower their own heart rate. So when they go on the scene of, as a first responder, say a car accident, that they're not bringing in their own adrenaline into the situation, because that intensifies the stress for the people that are involved. And so if they can lower their own heart rate first, they're much more effective at their jobs. And I think that translates so well into sales, that if you can get yourself in a positive place where you're adding value and you're looking forward to the conversation, that is going to come through in the conversations that you're having with your prospects.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. That's a great comparison.
Is there anything else that you want to add that you just think is good for people to know about sales, think about sales?
I think just kind of one of those, again, kind of a cliche, like golden rule, but I've always tried to put myself in my client's shoes. So really understanding what they may be thinking, what they may be going through. They're people just like us. Yep. And I've always tried to do that. And I think that's been helpful in developing those relationships and creating that trust and understanding, because there is such a huge element of trust.
And you're right that when you can have empathy and think about what would it feel like to be the person on the other end of this conversation, you can come in with so much more insight, value, and engagement for your customers when you put yourself in their shoes versus thinking about it from your shoes and your company's shoes.
Absolutely. And I think, I think this just applies to everybody. You don't have to be a salesperson to benefit from all this. We all have to try and sell ourselves when we go get a job. We have to sell an idea if you're not maybe in a sales position, but maybe there's a project that you're wanting to do for your organization. And so you're having to try and talk your upper management into, hey, this is why this program is great. So there's an element of sales, I believe, in almost every single thing we do. Yeah, I think as the world continues to develop, and I'm hoping that our thinking on sales continues.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that it has a more positive connotation moving forward.
Yeah, that if people really looked at sales of providing value, being of service to the customers, I always say sales is a mutual selection process. Mm-hmm. Finding good fit, that it's not about winning the sale, it's about checking for alignment and fit. And when there's alignment and fit, making it easy for that transaction to happen, or that relationship to start. It changes the way that you not only approach sales and think about sales, but it changes the experience for the customer as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Mindy Miley. I always have to say your full name. You are chock full of wisdom and just an amazing sales professional. And I know that the community in the Tri-Cities is so lucky to have you. So thank you for sharing your insights with the Sales Fiction Podcast.
Oh, well, thank you, Christy. I adore you. And I'm just so glad that you have this podcast out there so people can hear all your wisdom.
Oh, thank you.